When working with people dealing with chronic illness, one of the biggest mistakes practitioners make is approaching care in super short bursts. You treat each flare up like a new crisis. And chronic illness just doesn't resolve in a week. It improves through systems repair consistency and a plan that accounts for real life, right? Seasons, stress, travel, motivation dips. We all experience those, and even setbacks as things potentially get worse. Hello, everyone. Dr. Rob here. Today, we're going to be talking about designing an annual care plan for chronic illness clients. When working with people dealing with chronic illness, one of the biggest mistakes practitioners make is approaching care in super short bursts. You treat each flare up like a new crisis. And chronic illness just doesn't resolve in a week. It improves through systems repair consistency and a plan that accounts for real life, right? Seasons, stress, travel, motivation dips. We all experience those, and even setbacks as things potentially get worse. An annual care plan to me doesn't have to be rigid. It has to be more like a map. It's something that's designed to help clients feel safe and supported. It reduces overwhelm, it improves adherence, and it creates measurable progress over time. Today's training is going to dive into this, and it's a little bit more of a complex topic, but I want to really show how to design a simple, professional annual plan, something that supports long-term healing, accounts for flare cycles and seasons, builds habits gradually for clients, and gives people clarity about what comes next. So what is an annual care plan? It's not a promise of results. That's the biggest thing. I think people always think, oh, if I have this, it's going to guarantee results. But what it really acts as is a structured timeline with intentional phases that are built around the client's capacity and focused on steady, sustainable progression. So strong annual plans will answer questions like, what are we focusing on right now? What comes next if things improve? What do we do when symptoms flare up? And how will we measure progress? This is one of the biggest ones, as well as how do we maintain improvements long term? And I think the goal is to replace improvisation with structure, but maintaining flexibility. So a simple framework that works for most chronic conditions is going to be like a 4-phase model. Phase 1 will be stabilization. The goal here is to reduce symptom volatility and nervous system stress to focus, essentially start focusing on things like hydration, sleep rhythm, gentle nutrition upgrades, but nothing aggressive, to reduce inflammatory inputs, to establish baseline habits, and to reduce reactive cycles and crashes. Phase 2 is to move into the repair process. You want to restore depleted systems in the body, deeper gut support, nutrient rebuilding, hormones and metabolism stabilization, gentle, structured movement, right? Nothing too aggressive, and targeted microcurrent protocols as appropriate. Phase 3 is all about resilience. We want to increase capacity and reduce flare frequency. It's about more robust movement, expanded food tolerance, if that is appropriate for the client. Some people are just overly sensitive. Stress tolerance and stability through routine. And travel and life disruptions, therefore, will become less risky. And this is where people will often fall short. They can be totally fine, and then something comes up and it tanks them down. And then we move into the maintenance and optimization phase. We want to keep the gains with minimal intervention. One of the things I always like about microcurrent is the goal is not to mean that you will be using this every day for the rest of your life in order to just live normally. The goal is to rebuild your body and then use it to maintain, right? So really working on things like the minimal interventions as you get to that point, a simplified routine, right? For example, with eyes, you might need to work on originally aggressive dealing with cataracts protocols and getting more blood flow in. And then maybe you just move to a weekly maintenance of a 7 to 12 hertz step. So a simplified routine, seasonal tune-ups, knowing that, winter can be a bad one for immune systems and circulation, and thinking about these and planning these out. We talked about that a lot recently. Finding ways to recognize flares early and knowing what the triggers are to avoid those where possible, and refining the plan rather than rebuilding it. So we're not relearning everything, we're just refining it. Now, this gives people hope because they can see a path forward and they don't feel like they're stuck in phase one forever. Even if phase one does require a bit of time, they can see that at the end of the tunnel, there is something they can achieve. And I think it's important to start with the client's reality and not the ideal, because if you're building an annual care plan, it's going to fail when they're built for the ideal person, the client that's going to respond super fast and keep up with everything, and not the real person. So it's really important. Intake forms make a big stride forward here to get clarity on their capacity for their energy. Like, is it low, moderate, high? What are their finances and time availability? Like, are they going to be stressed about these things? Can they afford to buy new equipment, like an infrared sauna, for example, or do they not have that option? Do they have a support system, or are they alone? What is their relationship with food like? Do they have lifestyle changes that they need to make and that they might not be able to make? What's their medical complexity? Do they have contraindications? Are they taking a bunch of medications that mean they can't take certain supplements? And are they ready and willing to change, right? What is their level of that? If it's not there at all, then it's probably not going to work as a plan in general. And I think a realistic plan always seems more effective than an ambitious plan, because if you have an ambitious one, it can very easily just collapse quickly. So progress here is built through compliance and not intensity. We always say less is more with microcurrent, but it's kind of the same with everything, right? Now, a great way to make annual plans manageable is to divide the year into 4 90-day blocks. This is why we did the 90-day reset. This gives you clear milestones, built-in reassessment points. It's not super short, so it creates stress. And there's enough time for change to take effect, right? The cellular rate turnover, we're going to start to see new cells and the old ones are completely replaced. This is an opportunity to reset and to redirect as well, right? And this can be absolutely huge. So, for example, just off the top of my head, stabilization in Q1, so the first 3 months of the year. You work on hydration. You work on the circadian rhythm. You work on basic anti-inflammatory protocols and nutrition and gentle movement and some supplementation as needed, but not overwhelming. In the next set of 90 days, you could work on gut repair, since that's such a big problem for people with inflammation. You could work on rebuilding nutrients and then targeted protocols, more specific protocols for that conditions versus just general anti-inflammatory ones. And you can start to look into some deeper lifestyle habit changes. Any habits they were able to establish in the first 90 days are going to, at that point, be solid, right? So now we can start to add some more. Then you can work on building that resilience up, increasing movement capacity, expanding tolerance, strengthening the immune system, making the habits more solid and permanent, and then maintaining towards the end of the year and preparing for winter, right, where things are likely to flare up. This is all going to be about reducing flare risk, simplifying protocols, so you're not asking too much from your body, reinforcing recovery strategies, and planning for the inevitable holiday stress that comes and will throw them into a spiral if they're not prepared for it. And all of this creates structure without the client thinking that they're signing up for like a year of intense treatments. Now, the next thing would be to plan for flares instead of reacting to them. I think one of the biggest things you can do is to acknowledge the fact that a flare is going to happen at some point. This is their reality, and you can come in here and you can say, we have a plan. This is how we're going to deal with it if you get a flare or you see one coming. So a flare plan would be all about looking for early warning signs, what sleep changes and cravings and pain shifts are coming up. Then establishing what they should stop immediately, what they should increase immediately, and what requires practitioner contact versus them being able to handle it themselves. And in some extreme cases, what might require a medical referral, right? Having this in place, having something that they can visualize and look at, reduces panic, and it prevents the flare from becoming a total collapse. A client who knows what to do during a flare becomes far more confident and consistent, and you're not going to see those panicked calls or emails demanding assistance in the middle of the night. Now, progress should be measured too, and they need to choose measurable markers. One of the biggest things we see with clients is that they'll turn around and they'll say, well, I haven't noticed a change. Yet, when you ask them to establish like their pain before and their pain after, maybe they're down from a 9 to a 4. And so there's a change, there's not full resolution, but they don't see it that way. And progress, though, is not only pain level. For chronic illness, improvement can show up as better sleep continuity, improved morning energy. You feel less tired in the morning, reduced recovery time after exertion, right? Fewer spikes in your symptoms and improved digestion, just an improved mood, which often is not necessarily seen by you, but is maybe seen by another person in your family, and improved cognitive function, even increased tolerance to stress. Look at which of these things might be the biggest ones for your client and choose maybe 3 of them and track them monthly. Ask for tracking. The clients will then see progress, even when symptoms are not linear, and this is critical for their mindset that will allow them to actually heal. Now, all of this to say, you can't just watch a 10-minute training and know how to make a good annual plan. A well-designed annual care plan gives clients something they often lack. It gives them predictability. It gives them confidence. It gives them a sense of direction. And it is critical that we learn how to do these. These will make your life as a practitioner easier. And you can obviously charge more for a service that's something like this. But once you've got this established, it allows you as the practitioner and your client to have more confidence in how things are going. It turns into a structured process rather than a series of emotional crises that just keep slapping them in the face. So when we plan in phases, when we build in flare protocols, and when we work in these shorter cycles, the client's just going to end up less overwhelmed. They're going to end up with that ability to be more consistent and to be able to measure their improvement and to not then think that nothing is happening. And that will give them ultimately a cleaner relationship with their healing journey, which is ultimately, it's what we want, right? We want them to feel that they are a part of this, and this gives them the structure to be able to do that. Okay, so everyone, thank you for joining me for today's training. Hopefully you found this useful. Maybe it sparked some ideas in your mind of ways to deal with some of your more chronic clients that you're dealing with already, or future clients that you may have. If you have any questions, please let us know. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. See you next week for another one. Cheers.